I never thought a small piece of paper could change my entire life. Yet there I was, sitting in Dr. Montgomery's office on a late autumn afternoon, when he slipped me a folded note instead of handing me the test results I had been waiting for. His expression was unreadable, calm on the surface, but his eyes flickered with a tension that instantly unsettled me. I hesitated before opening it. My hands trembled, though I couldn't explain why. The note was brief, just a single line written in rushed, uneven letters. "Don't go home. Run." My heart skipped a beat. For a long moment I sat frozen, staring at those words as if they might rearrange themselves into something sensible. I looked up at Dr. Montgomery, expecting some explanation, but he simply adjusted his glasses and continued flipping through my file like nothing unusual had happened. His calmness made the message even more terrifying. I slipped the note into my purse. "Doctor, is everything all right?" He met my eyes, and for just a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. I saw genuine fear there. Then he cleared his throat. "Your results look stable, Mrs. Caldwell. I'll want to schedule another checkup in 3 months. Take care of yourself." That was it. No explanation. No hint that he had just handed me what felt like a lifeline or a warning. When I stepped outside, the cool air of late October bit at my cheeks. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered in the fading daylight. I climbed into my sedan, locked the doors, and sat there gripping the steering wheel. My mind spun in circles. Don't go home. Run. What did that even mean? Run from what? From whom? I thought about calling my son Benjamin, but something in my gut told me not to. In fact, the very idea of involving him suddenly filled me with unease. I couldn't quite explain. Instead, I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, circling the city, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, as though expecting someone to be following me. Finally, I pulled into a small roadside diner, the kind that smelled of fried onions and old coffee. I ordered tea. I didn't drink and sat in a booth, trying to steady my breathing. The note burned in my purse, demanding my attention. I took it out again, smoothing the creases. Don't go home. Run. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I was a 71-year-old widow, not a heroine in some thriller novel. Run. Where was I supposed to go? I had lived in the same house for over 40 years. Everything I owned, every memory, was within those walls. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Montgomery had meant exactly what he wrote. After nearly 2 hours in the diner, I made a decision. I wouldn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a small motel on the outskirts of town. It was a cheap place, the kind of establishment people used when they didn't want questions asked. The clerk barely looked at me when I paid cash for a room. Inside, the room was musty, the carpet threadbare, but it felt safer than my own house somehow. I set my purse on the nightstand and sat on the bed, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the building, every passing car light, sent my nerves jangling. I kept hearing the doctor's voice in my head, though he hadn't spoken the words aloud, just that one silent warning on paper. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Benjamin. "Mum, are you home? Tried calling. Pick up." My throat tightened. How did he know I wasn't there? I hadn't told him about my appointment. I hadn't told anyone. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and ignored it. A minute later, another message came. "Mum, everything okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. By 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally pulled me under, but even then, my dreams were restless. I dreamt of shadows moving through my house, of my husband's old study being ransacked, of my family's voices whispering things I couldn't quite understand. When I woke at dawn, drenched in sweat, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Dr. Montgomery hadn't been mistaken. Something was terribly wrong, and going home could very well cost me my life. The sun had barely risen when I sat up in the motel bed, my body stiff from the restless night. My first thought was to check my phone. A dozen missed calls from Benjamin, 3 from Eleanor, my daughter-in-law. A string of text messages from my granddaughter Olivia. At first I felt a pang of guilt. They probably thought something had happened to me. But then Dr. Montgomery's note resurfaced in my memory, as sharp and urgent as when I had first read it. Don't go home. If he was warning me about my own family, then every missed call was not concern. It was surveillance. I showered quickly and dressed, trying to shake the paranoia crawling over me. I needed answers. But where could I even begin? The diner from last night opened early, so I drove back there, sat in the same booth, and ordered black coffee. I unfolded the note again, tracing the hurried pen strokes with my finger. If the doctor had gone to such lengths to warn me, then surely he knew more. The only way forward was to confront him directly. At 9 o'clock sharp I called his office. The receptionist answered in her usual chipper tone, but when I asked to speak with Dr. Montgomery, her voice faltered. I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell. The doctor isn't available today. When will he be back? I pressed. There was a pause too long to be normal. He's out of town for the rest of the week. That didn't sit right with me. Yesterday he hadn't mentioned any trip. Something had happened between the time he gave me that note and this morning. My stomach clenched. I hung up quickly and paid for my coffee, scanning the room as I left. 2 men sat at the counter in suits far too formal for a roadside diner, their eyes flicking toward me when I passed. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. I drove without a destination, the note sitting on the passenger seat like a silent companion. My mind replayed every interaction with my family over the past year. Benjamin losing his job but refusing to explain why. Eleanor insisting I let her handle my banking to make things easier. Olivia sneaking into my study when she thought I wasn't looking. Small moments, odd behaviors, things I had brushed off as stress or youthful recklessness. But put together, they painted a different picture. By noon I had parked in a quiet lot near the river and pulled out my checkbook. I flipped through the stubs, comparing them against the statements I had brought home from the bank last month. Several checks were missing, entire transactions unaccounted for. A gnawing suspicion took root. I called the bank. After a long wait, a tired-sounding employee came on the line. I asked for my most recent activity. Her voice sharpened when she pulled up the account. Mrs. Caldwell, you've made several large withdrawals this week. Are you confirming those? I gripped the phone tighter. What withdrawals? 3 transactions. One for $10,000, one for 15 and another for 5. All signed by you. My breath caught in my throat. That's impossible. I haven't been to the bank in weeks. I'm looking at the paperwork right here. Same signature, same ID verification. The world tilted around me. If someone had forged my signature, it meant they had access not only to my checks, but also to my identification. That narrowed the suspects to people close to me, people who could easily get into my house. I ended the call abruptly, my pulse racing. My family. They weren't just careless or greedy. They were actively stealing from me. And if Dr. Montgomery's note was right, the theft was only the beginning. That evening I returned to the motel room, my mind a storm of fear and betrayal. I tried to convince myself that maybe Benjamin had only taken the money temporarily, that maybe Eleanor had pushed him into it. But then the phone buzzed again. A new message. From Benjamin. Mom, we need to talk. It's important. Please come home tonight. The words chilled me. The timing was too perfect, as though he already knew I had discovered the theft. I didn't reply. Instead I closed the curtains, double-locked the motel door, and slid the chair under the handle. I sat in silence, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, until fatigue finally forced me into uneasy sleep. But sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound that didn't belong, the crunch of gravel outside my window. I froze, straining to listen. Voices, low-hushed, unmistakably human. Slowly I crawled to the curtain and pulled it back just enough to peek outside. 2 figures stood near my car, flashlights glinting off the chrome. They weren't random thieves. They were searching. One of them leaned down and shone the light directly into the vehicle, as if checking for something. My blood turned to ice. They knew where I was. I crouched in the darkness, every muscle tense, my breath shallow. The glow of the flashlights swept across the parking lot, sliding over my car, bouncing off the motel's faded sign. My heart hammered against my ribs so loudly I was afraid they would hear it. The taller of the two men motioned to the other. "Nothing in the car," he muttered. His voice was muffled by the glass, but I could make out the words. The shorter one moved closer to my door. He jiggled the handle just once, as if testing it. I froze. The flimsy lock suddenly felt like paper. Then the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, another guest returning to their room. The two men stiffened, exchanged a glance, and walked briskly back toward a dark sedan parked at the edge of the lot. Within seconds, the engine roared to life, and they were gone. I stayed glued to the spot for several minutes, waiting, listening. Only when silence settled again did I dare to move. My hands trembled as I dialed the front desk. "Front office," a groggy clerk answered. "There were men outside my room," I whispered. "Two of them. They tried to open my car." "Please, you need to check the cameras." The clerk sighed. "Ma'am, our cameras haven't worked in years. Do you want me to call the police?" Yes, I wanted to scream, but what would I tell them? That I suspected my own family had sent strangers to follow me? That a doctor's note had told me not to go home? Without evidence, I'd sound like the paranoid old woman they wanted me to be. "No," I said quickly. "No, it's fine, thank you." I hung up before he could argue. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping Dr. Montgomery's note so tightly the paper nearly tore. My instincts screamed at me to run farther, to vanish before they found me again. But running blind would only delay the inevitable. I needed proof. The next morning, I drove into the city, parking several blocks away from the bank, where my stolen checks had been cashed. I wore sunglasses, and a scarf, ridiculous disguises that only made me look more conspicuous. But paranoia had taken root in my bones. Inside, I asked to speak with the branch manager. A polite woman named Mrs. Lang ushered me into her office. I explained that I had discovered fraudulent withdrawals from my account. Her smile faltered. "Do you have the transaction numbers?" she asked. I handed over the crumpled notes where I had written them down from yesterday's call. She typed them into her computer, her brow furrowing deeper with each keystroke. Finally she looked up. "These withdrawals were processed in person," she said carefully. "The signatures match your file exactly." And, she hesitated. "We have video recordings." My pulse quickened. "Show me." She turned the monitor toward me and pressed play. The grainy footage showed a woman at the teller's counter, signing paperwork. At first glance, she looked like me. Same height, same silver hair, even the same handbag. But then she turned slightly toward the camera. It wasn't me, it was Eleanor. I leaned closer, my breath catching. She had gone to the trouble of styling her hair like mine, even wearing glasses similar to mine. And she carried my old handbag, the one I thought I had misplaced last month. Rage surged through me, hot and suffocating. She hadn't just stolen my money, she had stolen my face. Mrs. Lang looked uneasy. "Do you want us to freeze your accounts, Mrs. Caldwell?" "Yes, immediately. And I want copies of all this footage, every second." She hesitated. "We'll need to involve the police." "Good," I snapped. "Involve them." For the first time I felt the ground tilt back in my favor. Proof. Hard, undeniable proof. But even as I left the bank clutching the USB drive of footage, a chill gnawed at me. If Eleanor had gone to such lengths, what else was she capable of? Forged checks were one thing, but what if she had her eyes on something bigger, something that could erase me completely? That evening, back at the motel, I opened my laptop. I replayed the footage over and over, each time feeling a mix of fury and fear. On the sixth replay, I noticed something I had missed before. Eleanor wasn't alone. In the background, barely visible, stood Benjamin, glancing nervously around the lobby. So it wasn't just her, it was both of them. Working together. I closed the laptop, exhaustion dragging me down, but just as I looked back, my phone buzzed with a new message, this time from Olivia. Grandma, please. I don't know what's going on, but Mom and Dad are scaring me. Can we meet? Just the two of us? I stared at the screen, torn between suspicion and longing. Part of me wanted to trust her, to believe that at least one person in my family hadn't turned against me, but another part whispered that it could be a trap. Finally, I typed a reply. Tomorrow, noon, public place. And I'm recording everything. Her response came instantly. Okay, I just want you to hear me out. As I set the phone down, I caught my reflection in the darkened TV screen. My face looked older than I remembered. Lined, weary and tired. But behind the weariness was something sharper, something harder. Resolve. If they thought they could erase me, they had underestimated the one thing they hadn't accounted for. I wasn't done fighting. The cafe was bright, bustling, filled with the comforting aroma of roasted coffee beans and pastries. I had chosen it carefully, public, safe, with plenty of witnesses. I arrived 20 minutes early and sat at a corner table where I could see the entrance. My phone was set to record, tucked discreetly beside my cup of tea. At exactly noon, Olivia walked in. She looked nothing like the polished, confident granddaughter I remembered. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her clothes rumpled, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes, swollen from crying, darted nervously around the cafe until they landed on me. She hesitated before walking over, as if afraid I might reject her outright. Grandma, she whispered, sliding into the seat across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I studied her, trying to read her expression. She seemed broken, but I'd been deceived before. What do you want, Olivia? I asked at last, keeping my voice even. She clasped her trembling hands together. I want to tell you the truth. I can't keep pretending anymore. I arched an eyebrow. Pretending what exactly? That I don't know what Mom and Dad have been doing. A sharp ache twisted in my chest. I wanted so badly for her to be innocent, to be the one who hadn't turned against me. But the truth had to come first. Go on, I said quietly. Her voice cracked. It started small. At first, they just talked about convincing you to move into a nursing home. Mom said you'd be happier with people your own age. Dad said the house was too much for you. I almost believed them. Almost, I asked. She swallowed hard. Then Mom started going through your papers. Your bank statements, your pension forms. She called your bank pretending to be you. She even went to see your old boss to ask about your retirement. Each word hit me like a hammer. Eleanor hadn't just schemed, she had invaded every corner of my life. And then, I pressed. Olivia's gaze fell to the table. When they realized you could live another 20 years. Mom, she said she couldn't wait that long. She said she needed the money now. My throat tightened. Why? What for? For Dad's debts. Her voice was barely audible. He's been gambling for years. He owes over $100,000 to people who aren't very patient. Dangerous people. Mom said if they didn't pay soon, something terrible would happen. I sat back, stunned. Benjamin, my son, the boy I had raised, sacrificed for, had gambled away his life and mine along with it. And what about you? I asked, my tone sharper now. What part did you play? Olivia's lips trembled. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach. The realization struck me before she even spoke. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The father, he's married. He doesn't want anything to do with the baby. I needed money, Grandma. I didn't know what else to do. My chest constricted, a storm of emotions battling inside me, grief for the child she carried, fury at the betrayal, sorrow for how far we had all fallen. And so you thought helping them destroy me was the answer. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know they wanted to drive you crazy. I swear I didn't. I thought they just wanted a doctor to say you needed extra care. That's all. But when you left the house, everything got worse. Mom and Dad fight all the time. They blame each other for everything. And now they're blaming me. I frowned. Blaming you. For what? She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I started recording them. Their fights, their plans. Last night Dad said if everything goes wrong they'll tell everyone I was the one who stole your jewelry. That I manipulated them because I needed money for drugs. Drugs? I scoffed. I don't use drugs, she said quickly. But he said it would be easier to convince people. That everyone would believe the rebellious teenager over the responsible adults. Bile rose in my throat. They weren't just willing to sacrifice me. They were ready to sacrifice their own daughter to save themselves. Do you have proof of this? I asked. She nodded, showing me recordings of Eleanor counting my jewelry, of Benjamin ranting about debts, of both of them plotting how to frame her if things collapsed. The rage that had simmered in me for weeks finally found focus. With this evidence, their entire web of lies could come crashing down. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, still wary. Why not weeks ago? Her shoulders sagged. Because I was scared. But after last night, I realized they don't care about me either. They'll throw me to the wolves if it means saving themselves. I can't live like that. I want out. I want to do the right thing. I studied her, searching for deception, but all I saw was a frightened, desperate girl trying to claw her way out of a nightmare. What do you want in return for your testimony? I asked. Her answer was immediate. I don't want money. I want help. Help finishing high school. Help figuring out what to do about the baby. Help becoming strong like you. My heart softened despite everything. I reached across the table, taking her trembling hand in mine. Olivia, I said gently, if you truly mean this, if you're ready to help me get justice, I will stand by you. I'll help you finish school. I'll help you with the baby. And I'll teach you something even more valuable. Her eyes lifted, wet with tears. What's that? That real family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty, respect and love. And sometimes protecting yourself means walking away from people who share your last name. She squeezed my hand tightly. Deal, Grandma. From now on I'm your ally, and allies protect each other. A spark of hope flickered in me, fragile but real. For the first time in months I felt the faint possibility of redemption, not just for myself, but for her too. What my son and his wife had started as a conspiracy of betrayal was about to collapse under the weight of truth, and now I had an unexpected ally by my side. The courthouse loomed large and unforgiving, its stone facade reflecting the weight of centuries of justice and injustice. As I stepped through its doors on the first morning of the trial, the air seemed charged with tension. Reporters crowded outside, their cameras flashing, their questions tumbling over one another like waves in a storm. Mrs. Caldwell, how do you feel about testifying against your own son? Do you believe justice will truly be served? Are you afraid of the outcome? I ignored them all, walking forward with my head held high. For weeks I had been painted as a frail old woman teetering on the edge of madness, but now I was ready to reveal the truth. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every older person who had been silenced, manipulated, or betrayed by the people they trusted most. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low murmurs. Benjamin and Eleanor sat at the defense table, their faces stiff masks of composure. Eleanor avoided my gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. Benjamin, however, stared straight ahead, refusing to look at me. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched, and his eyes held the dullness of a man who had gambled away more than money. He had gambled away his soul. The judge, a stern woman with sharp features, called the court to order. The jury filed in, their expressions carefully neutral, though I wondered what they truly thought of the spectacle before them. A mother testifying against her son, a grandmother against her family. The prosecution opened first. The attorney laid out the case with precision. Conspiracy to defraud, forgery of legal documents, elder abuse, and attempted coercion. Exhibits were introduced, bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, the forged medical reports, the recordings Olivia and I had gathered. Each piece was like a brick laid carefully into the foundation of truth. Then it was the defense's turn. Their attorney, a slick man with an easy smile, attempted to paint me as a bitter woman, obsessed with money and control. He described me as vindictive, possessive, and unwilling to let go. He even suggested that my live stream had been nothing more than a performance, carefully crafted to embarrass my family in public. At that, a murmur rippled through the gallery. I lifted my chin. Let him try. Facts were stronger than words, and soon enough, the facts would speak. When it was time for me to take the stand, my heart pounded so hard I feared it might give me away. I swore to tell the truth, then settled into the witness chair. Mrs. Caldwell, the prosecutor began gently, can you tell us, in your own words, when you first suspected that your family was conspiring against you? I took a deep breath and began. I told them about the doctor's warning note, about the forged prescriptions, about the gaslighting and manipulation, the stolen jewelry, the constant whispers meant to make me doubt my sanity. I described the night I fled, the evidence I uncovered, the live stream that had turned the tide. The courtroom hung on every word. Jurors leaned forward, pens hovering over their notepads. The prosecution guided me carefully, ensuring each fact was clear, each piece of evidence tied to my testimony. Then came the cross-examination. Mrs. Caldwell, the defense attorney said smoothly, isn't it true that you have significant financial resources your family didn't know about? Yes, I answered plainly. I saved for decades, quietly and wisely. I didn't feel the need to broadcast my finances to anyone. And isn't it also true, he pressed, that you never told your son and daughter-in-law about these funds, despite knowing they were struggling financially? I met his gaze without flinching. Their financial problems do not justify conspiring to destroy my life. Secrets do not justify crimes. He smirked faintly. But surely as a mother, you had some obligation to help them. I leaned forward slightly. An obligation to help, perhaps, but no obligation to be robbed. No obligation to be deceived. And certainly no obligation to be driven into madness so that they could inherit early. That is not help. That is cruelty. The jury's eyes flickered toward the defense table, where Benjamin shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor's face flushed red. The attorney tried another angle. And what about your granddaughter? Isn't it true she also benefited from your financial support? Yes, I said firmly. And unlike her parents, she is here because she chose truth over lies. She risked her own safety to bring me evidence. That is what family means. The attorney hesitated, then sat down, his smile faltering. When Olivia took the stand, she was nervous, but her voice was steady. She confirmed everything. The recordings, the threats, the plan to frame her if things went wrong. She even revealed her pregnancy, explaining why she had stayed silent for so long. Her testimony drew tears from several jurors, and I felt both pride and sorrow watching her find her strength. As the days went on, more evidence piled up. FBI reports confirmed the forgery transactions. Witnesses testified about Benjamin's gambling debts. Even Dr. Montgomery testified, his professional voice ringing with indignation as he explained how medical documents had been falsified. By the fifth day, the truth was undeniable. The defense tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that my family had only been concerned for my well-being, but the evidence shredded that narrative into pieces. Finally, the jury retired to deliberate. The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence. Hours passed. I sat with Olivia beside me, her hand in mine, both of us holding our breath. When the jury returned, their verdict was swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. The room erupted with murmurs. Eleanor broke into sobs, covering her face with trembling hands. Benjamin sat motionless, his eyes empty, as if all fight had drained from him at once. The judge delivered the sentences. Benjamin 12 years in prison. Eleanor 10 years, with additional charges for mortgage fraud. Each word struck like the tolling of a bell, solemn, inevitable, final. And as the gavel came down, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. 6 months had passed since the verdict, and life had changed in ways I could never have imagined during those long, fearful nights when I thought I was losing my mind. The old house, with its painful memories and heavy silence, was gone. In its place, I had purchased a modest but beautiful home on the outskirts of the city, a place filled with sunlight, surrounded by gardens and alive with the promise of peace. It was smaller, yes, but it was mine. Every corner of it felt like freedom. The mornings began with the chirping of birds instead of the echo of deceitful whispers. I spent hours tending the flowers, planting seeds not only in the soil but also in my heart, where hope had begun to blossom again. Olivia lived with me now. After the trial, she had chosen to stay by my side, and I welcomed her with open arms. Our relationship, once strained by secrets and manipulation, had transformed into something genuine and precious. She was no longer just my granddaughter. She had become my ally, my confidant, the daughter of my heart that I had always longed for. She finished high school with honors, despite the chaos of the past year. I attended her graduation, tears streaming down my face as I watched her walk across the stage in her cap and gown. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud, not just of her but of us both, for surviving, for enduring, for refusing to be broken. Olivia had made her decision about her pregnancy too. She chose to keep the baby, a choice that filled me with both worry and admiration. "Grandma," she had said one quiet evening as we sat in the garden, "this child will grow up knowing the truth about loyalty, about love. I won't repeat Mom and Dad's mistakes." I placed my hand over hers and whispered, "That's all I could ever ask of you." In time, she revealed her new dream to study law, inspired by everything we had endured together. She wanted to specialize in elder protection, determined to ensure that no one else would have to face the horrors I had faced. The fire in her eyes when she spoke of it reminded me of the strength I once feared she would never discover. Meanwhile, Benjamin and Eleanor attempted to contact me from prison. Letters arrived, filled with apologies, pleas for forgiveness, and thinly veiled attempts to regain control. I never opened them. Straight into the trash they went. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about allowing someone back into your life. It was about freeing yourself from the weight of their betrayal, and I was free. With Dr. Montgomery's encouragement, I took another step forward. I founded a small organization dedicated to helping older people who were victims of financial or emotional abuse. What began as a few phone calls turned into weekly meetings, then into a growing community. We shared stories, offered support, and guided one another through legal and emotional battles. For the first time, my suffering became a source of strength for others. One day, a woman named Carol Sterling, the same social worker who had once written to thank me after my live stream, visited me. She smiled warmly as she entered my home, carrying a folder full of resources and ideas. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, "your story has already saved lives. Now with your foundation, you can save countless more." Her words filled me with purpose. I realized that I had not only survived, but I had been given the chance to transform my pain into something meaningful. Evenings in my new home were the most precious of all. Olivia and I would sit in the garden, sipping tea as the sun set. Sometimes she would study, her books spread across the table, while I read or tended to the plants. Other times, we would simply talk about the future, about her baby, about the meaning of family. One night, she asked me a question that cut straight to my heart. "Grandma," she said softly, "do you ever regret adopting Dad?" I looked at her for a long moment, the flowers around us swaying in the evening breeze. "I don't regret adopting him," I said finally. "I regret not realizing sooner that kindness should never come at the cost of self-destruction. Love is a gift, not a leash." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I don't ever want to make the same mistake." "You won't," I assured her. "Because you've already learned the lesson that took me 70 years to understand. Real family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, respect, and love that doesn't betray." Life was not perfect. There were still challenges, fears, and the shadow of the past that sometimes crept into my dreams. But each morning when I woke up in my sunlit bedroom, I reminded myself that I had survived, that I had chosen to rebuild instead of surrender, that I had turned endings into beginnings. At 71 years old, I was finally living not for others, not in fear but for myself. I traveled when I wished, read endlessly, laughed often, and allowed joy back into my heart. Most importantly, I had discovered the courage to love myself as fiercely as I had loved everyone else. And that, I realized, was the greatest justice of all. The foundation began as nothing more than a dream scribbled in the margins of my journal. A few notes here, an idea there, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just possible, it was necessary. I had survived because a single doctor dared to pass me a warning note, because I found the courage to speak publicly, and because strangers rallied around me when my own family tried to destroy me. What about the people who didn't get that chance? Who didn't have a doctor, Sterling, or a live stream, or the support of thousands of strangers? I wanted to be that chance for them. At first it was just Olivia and me sitting at the dining table in our little sunlit house, brainstorming names. She had her laptop open, and I had a yellow notepad. "How about voices for the elderly?" she suggested. I shook my head. "Too long. We need something strong, something people will remember." "What about just the Caldwell Foundations?" she said shyly. I smiled. "No, my dear. This isn't about me. This is about everyone who has been silenced, ignored, or betrayed. It needs to belong to all of us." After an hour of tossing ideas back and forth, Olivia closed her laptop with a sigh. "You know, Grandma, maybe it's not the name that matters most. Maybe it's what we do with it." She was right as usual. In the end, we settled on something simple: the foundation of strength. It carried the weight of resilience, of survival, of rising again. It was what I wanted for every person who came to us: strength to endure and strength to start over. Our first meeting took place in the community hall at the local library. I expected maybe 10 people. 25 showed up. They were men and women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, carrying invisible wounds behind polite smiles. Some came with canes, others with grandchildren by their side. Every single one of them had a story. One man said his son had tricked him into signing over his house. A woman admitted that her daughter regularly took her pension, leaving her with barely enough to eat. Another confessed that his family had threatened to put him in a nursing home if he didn't hand over his bank account passwords. As I listened, tears welled in my eyes. The stories were different, but the pain was the same. Each of them, like me, had been betrayed by the very people they trusted most. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, my heart heavy but resolute. "My name is Martha Caldwell," I began. "6 months ago, I discovered that my family was plotting to declare me mentally incompetent, commit me to a nursing home, and steal everything I owned. I survived because I refused to stay silent, and I want you all to know that you are not alone. You do not have to suffer in silence either. Together we are stronger than the people who betrayed us." The room erupted in quiet applause, some clapping with trembling hands, others simply nodding with tears streaming down their cheeks. For the first time, they weren't victims. They were survivors standing together. From that night on, the foundation grew. We held weekly meetings. We organized workshops with lawyers, financial advisors, and social workers. Dr. Montgomery himself volunteered his time to talk about the warning signs of psychological abuse and fraudulent medical practices. Local journalists began to cover our gatherings, and before long, people from other cities were calling, asking how they could join. Olivia was at the heart of it all. She managed our social media pages, responded to messages, and designed flyers. Watching her work filled me with pride. She wasn't just rebuilding her own life, she was helping rebuild others. One evening, as we sorted through emails, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Grandma, do you realize how big this could get? This isn't just local anymore. People from other states are asking for help. We could build something national, even international. Her words filled me with both excitement and fear. I had started this foundation to heal, not to lead a movement, but maybe healing and leading were two sides of the same coin. Not everyone welcomed our work though. With growth came resistance. One afternoon, I received an anonymous letter in the mail. Inside was a single sentence, typed in bold black ink: "Stay quiet or you'll regret it." Olivia's eyes widened when she saw it. "Grandma, this is a threat. We need to take it to the police." I agreed, but deep inside, fear stirred again. The shadows of betrayal had not disappeared. They had only changed form. Someone somewhere did not want us to succeed. When I showed the letter to Dr. Montgomery, he frowned. "This is a sign you're making an impact," he said. "Abusers don't like to be exposed. They thrive in silence. The fact that someone is trying to intimidate you means your work is hitting a nerve." He was right, but it didn't make it easier to sleep at night. Sometimes I would wake up at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, remembering the fear I felt when I thought my family would lock me away. I reminded myself that this was different now. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies, a community, and a granddaughter who stood by me with unwavering courage. One night, Olivia sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly together. "Grandma," she said softly, "I know this is scary, but think about how scared those people at our meetings were. If you back down now, what happens to them?" Her words struck me like lightning. She was right. Silence had almost destroyed me once. I would not let it destroy others. So I pressed on. The foundation of strength became more than a support group. It became a movement. We lobbied for stronger elder protection laws. We collaborated with law enforcement to catch financial predators. We worked with schools to educate teenagers about respecting and supporting older family members. And slowly I realized something profound. My tragedy had transformed into my purpose. The very thing meant to break me had become the fire that lit my path forward. Growth brought attention, and attention brought enemies. At first it was subtle, nasty comments on our foundation's social media pages, dismissive remarks in local newspapers, accusing me of exaggerating my story for fame, but then the attacks grew darker. One evening, as Olivia and I returned home from a foundation meeting, we found our front gate wide open. I knew I had locked it before leaving. Inside, nothing seemed stolen, but drawers had been pulled out, and papers scattered across the floor. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Olivia's face went pale. "Grandma, someone's been here." I dialed the police immediately. They arrived within minutes, but as I watched them take notes and dust for fingerprints, dread settled deep in my chest. Whoever had done this wasn't after valuables. They were sending a message. The next morning an email arrived from an untraceable account. "Stop stirring up trouble. Old wounds should stay buried." I showed it to Dr. Montgomery, who insisted we take extra precautions. He arranged for a security consultant to install cameras and alarms around the house. Still the unease lingered. At our next foundation meeting, I hesitated to mention the break-in, but Olivia nudged me gently. "They deserve to know, Grandma. If someone's targeting us, they might target others too." So I stood before the group, my hands trembling only slightly. "Friends, I need to share something. Our house was broken into last night. Nothing was taken, but the message was clear. They want us to stop. But I need you all to understand, I will not stop. And neither should you. If we allow fear to silence us, then the abusers win." A murmur swept through the room, but instead of panic, I saw determination in their eyes. One elderly man raised his cane like a banner. "Let them try. We've lived too long to be scared now." The solidarity of that moment strengthened my resolve. Yet fear had a way of creeping in during the quiet hours. One night, as rain lashed against the windows, I lay awake replaying every betrayal of my past, the forged documents, the fake power of attorney, the lies whispered in the dark. Now those same shadows seemed to be stretching into my new life. Olivia noticed my restlessness. Over breakfast, she said, Grandma, you're slipping back into old fears. Don't let them win twice. Her words hit me like a gentle slap. She was right. I had survived worse than anonymous threats. Still, things escalated. During a live-streamed event, where I spoke about elder rights, the chat was suddenly flooded with vile messages. Crazy old woman. Gold digger. Your family was right to lock you up. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to continue speaking, even as Olivia frantically blocked the accounts. Afterward, I collapsed into my chair, exhausted. Olivia knelt beside me. Grandma, they want you to quit. That's the whole point. I stroked her hair. Then we'll make sure every word I speak is louder than their silence. Despite the threats, momentum built. A major newspaper ran a feature on our foundation. Donations began pouring in. Lawyers, doctors, and social workers volunteered their time. Each victory seemed to draw more fire from the shadows, but also more light from those who believed in us. One day, as we reviewed case files, Olivia looked at me with a seriousness far beyond her years. Do you think this will ever end? I thought carefully before answering. The threats? Maybe. The fear? Perhaps not. But the fight? That will end only when silence ends. And if I must carry this burden for the rest of my days, I will. It was then that I realized the truth. I was no longer just a survivor. I had become a symbol. And symbols once ignited cannot easily be extinguished. The threats had become a constant drumbeat in the background of our work, but I refused to let them derail the mission. What I didn't expect was that the most dangerous wound would come, not from an enemy in the shadows, but from someone I thought was firmly on our side. It began with missing funds. One morning, while reviewing the Foundation's financial reports, I noticed a $15,000 withdrawal labeled as administrative costs. That struck me as odd, since we had strict approval procedures for expenses over $1,000. I called our treasurer, Mr. Daniels, an elderly accountant who had volunteered his time since the Foundation's birth. He sounded flustered. Oh, that must be a clerical error, Mrs. Caldwell. I'll sort it out right away. Something in his tone didn't sit right with me. 2 days later, another irregularity appeared. This time $7,500. Then $9,000. I confronted him directly in his small cluttered office. Mr. Daniels, I need the truth. Where is this money going? His face crumpled like a paper bag. I'm sorry, Martha. I never meant for it to get this far. My son, he's in trouble. Gambling debts, dangerous people. I thought I could borrow from the Foundation and replace it when anyone noticed. My stomach twisted. Gambling. The very same poison that had corroded Benjamin's life was now infecting the organization I had built as a sanctuary. Do you realize what you've done? I whispered, my voice trembling with both fury and grief. This foundation isn't just numbers in a ledger. It's hope. It's trust. You've betrayed not just me but every person who believed in us. Tears welled in his eyes. Please, Martha. Give me time. I'll fix it, I swear. But promises meant little to me now. I had lived through too many false ones. That night, Olivia found me sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. Grandma. What happened? When I told her, her fists clenched. We can't let him stay. If people find out, it will destroy everything. I know, I admitted. But part of me aches for him. He's not malicious, just desperate. Isn't that what destroyed your father too? Desperation and weakness. Olivia sat beside me. Yes, but we can't save everyone. Sometimes protecting the mission means cutting ties, even with people we care about. Her words echoed with wisdom she shouldn't have had to carry at her age. The following day, I gathered the board of directors. My voice shook only once as I explained the situation. Mr. Daniels resigned immediately, his shame written in every line of his hunched shoulders. We filed a legal complaint, not out of vengeance, but out of duty. The betrayal spread through our community like wildfire. Some supporters wavered, questioning whether we were trustworthy. Donations slowed. Media outlets that once praised us now ran headlines about mismanagement and Elder Protection Foundation. For the first time since this journey began, I considered giving up, not because of fear but because of exhaustion. One evening, as I sat in the garden staring at the fading sun, Olivia placed a steaming cup of tea in front of me. "You know what Dad used to say, when he gambled away his paycheck?" I looked at her wearily. "What?" She smirked bitterly. "He'd say, 'You can't quit when the game turns against you, or you'll never win anything.'" I hated that line. But you know what? This time he was right. You can't quit now, Grandma. If you do, then Mr. Daniels wins. Then Dad wins. Then everyone who ever tried to silence you wins. Her conviction rekindled a flame inside me. She was right. I hadn't fought this long, survived this much, only to crumble because of one man's weakness. So I stood at our next public event, facing cameras and a skeptical crowd, and I spoke the truth. Yes, we have faced betrayal. Yes, someone we trusted made mistakes. But our mission is larger than one person. It is larger than me. It is about every grandmother, every grandfather, every elder whose voice was silenced. And as long as I can stand, I will not let silence win. The applause began cautiously, then swelled into a roar. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide turning back in our favor. That night, Olivia hugged me tightly. "See, Grandma, even when they break your trust, you find a way to rebuild it stronger. That's why people follow you." And though my heart still carried scars, I realized something profound. Betrayal, no matter how deep, could not define us. It could only test how fiercely we chose to rise again. The storm of scandal passed, but the scars remained. For months I worked side by side with Olivia, rebuilding the trust our foundation had lost. To my amazement, people didn't turn away. They rallied. Survivors of elder abuse wrote letters of encouragement. Strangers sent small donations with handwritten notes for my grandmother who didn't live long enough to see justice. Every envelope felt like a hand lifting us back to our feet. But life has a way of reminding us that peace is fragile. One morning, a package arrived at the new office. No return address. The receptionist brought it to me, her face pale. The handwriting on the box was disturbingly familiar, sharp, uneven strokes that sent a chill crawling up my spine. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a single envelope, and in it a sheet of paper with 4 words, "Don't go home, run." The same warning that had once saved my life. My hands trembled. For a moment the past came rushing back. Benjamin, Eleanor, the forged documents, the cruel gaslighting, but both of them were behind bars. Who could possibly be warning me now, or threatening me? Olivia found me frozen with the note. "Grandma, is that?" "Yes," I whispered, "the exact same message Dr. Sterling gave me that night." We contacted him immediately. His voice was heavy with concern. "Martha, this may not be a coincidence. A message like that suggests someone has been watching you closely." "Watching me?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, and if they know the history of that phrase, it means they know far too much about you." For the next week, security around the foundation tightened. Police were informed, though they admitted it might be a cruel prank. But deep down, I sensed it wasn't a prank. Then came the fire. Late one evening, as Olivia and I returned from a meeting, we saw flames devouring the rear of the base. Alarms wailed, smoke poured into the night sky, and firefighters battled desperately to contain the blaze. Most of the structure was saved, but our records, testimonies, case files, evidence archives were gone, reduced to ash. It was no accident. Investigators found traces of accelerant. Someone had tried to erase everything we had built. Olivia's fury burned brighter than the flames. "They think they can silence us, Grandma. They think a fire will stop us?" I looked at her, my chest swelling with both pride and sorrow. "Then we will rebuild again. Stronger, wiser, and we'll make sure they regret underestimating us." In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary happened. News of the arson spread, and instead of crumbling, support multiplied. Donations tripled. Survivors who had once been too afraid to speak now stepped forward, demanding to be heard. Politicians began contacting us, asking how they could help strengthen laws against elder exploitation. The attack meant to destroy us had become our rallying cry. Months later, I stood at the United Nations in Geneva, delivering a speech on global elder protection. Olivia sat in the front row, her hands resting on her growing belly, her eyes shining with pride. When my doctor once handed me a note that said, "Don't go home, run," I thought it was only about survival. I told the audience, but I have learned it was about more than that. It was a message to every elder who feels trapped, every soul who believes they must endure cruelty in silence. Sometimes survival means running, not from life, but toward the truth, toward freedom, toward dignity. The hall erupted in applause, but my eyes stayed fixed on Olivia. She wasn't just my granddaughter anymore. She was my partner, my legacy, and living proof that even in the ashes of betrayal, new life could bloom. That night, in our quiet hotel room, Olivia asked softly, "Do you think it's over, Grandma? The threats, the warnings, the shadows?" I considered her question carefully. Over? No, evil never ends. It changes faces, finds new disguises, but so does courage, and as long as we carry the truth forward, we'll never really be alone. She smiled, placing my hand over her heart. Then we'll face it together. For the first time in decades, I felt no fear of tomorrow. Not because the danger was gone, but because I knew that whatever came, we had the strength to stand, to fight, and to begin again. As I drifted to sleep, I whispered a silent prayer of thanks, for Dr. Sterling's courage, for my own resilience, and above all for the chance to turn one desperate warning into a lifetime of purpose. And perhaps that was the real lesson all along. Endings aren't always disasters. Sometimes they are invitations to write a new dawn. A year had passed since the trial. My life, once defined by shadows of betrayal, had found light again. The scars of what Benjamin and Eleanor had done would never fully disappear, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they reminded me of my own strength, my courage to stand when everyone expected me to fall. Olivia lived with me now, her baby growing healthier and happier each day. Watching her study law while holding her child, I realized the cycle of deception had been broken. She would not repeat the mistakes of her parents. She had chosen truth, and in doing so she had chosen freedom. The foundation we created for elder protection flourished. Letters poured in from across the country, people thanking me, sharing their stories, seeking guidance. What began as my personal war against betrayal had become a shield for thousands of others. That was my true victory, not just the prison sentences of my betrayers. Benjamin and Eleanor wrote often from prison, their words begging for forgiveness. But forgiveness is not forgetting, nor is it erasing the harm done. Some doors, once closed, must remain closed forever. Their letters sit unopened in a drawer I never open. That chapter of my life is finished. And me? I started living again. I traveled, painted, planted roses in my new garden, and laughed without fear. For the first time in decades, I felt I was living for myself, not as a mother, not as a wife, not as a provider, but simply as Martha. One evening, Olivia asked me, "Grandma, do you regret everything that happened?" I thought carefully before answering. "No," I said at last. Because from betrayal, I learned resilience. From lies, I learned to value truth. From loss, I discovered myself. Without all of that, I would never have found the freedom I live today. She nodded, tears in her eyes. And in that moment, I knew the story had come full circle. I was no longer the frightened woman clutching a note that said, "Don't go home, run." I was the woman who had faced the storm, survived it, and built a new world from its ruins. As I sat on the porch watching the sunset, with Olivia and her baby beside me, I whispered to myself, "Family is not who shares your blood. Family is who shares your heart." And with that truth, my story finally found its ending.